and this is Black Forest Comics Weekly Review Episode 33, where we're going to talk about the comics that came out last week, as well as the comics coming out this Wednesday, as well as some geeky news at the end. So, let's get started with last week's comics. First up, Irathune, issue number 1 from Stranger Comics. Now, this might seem stranger to you, but this is a new comic book series, and it's really, really good. Like, again, I've spoke to you all about how I am fascinated with Dungeons & Dragons and the whole fantasy realm type stuff. That's exactly what this is. This guy's a dwarf who has a cursed axe, who killed his brother, and he's going back to his land that he was born upon to redeem his name and to fight for his father's honor. And he's got an elf with him, or a couple of different elves, and a human and some giant rock guy. But it's a really good comic. I really enjoyed it so far. I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen with this elf and the rest of his family and the war that's coming upon them that the orcs are bringing and the goblins are bringing. So it's a really good comic. Issue number 1 just came out. Irathune, issue number 1 from Stranger Comics. Check it out. All right, next up. Star Wars C-3PO, issue number 1. Now this is going to be a one-shot that Marvel's putting out, and it's going to explain why C-3PO has that red arm. If you saw the movie The Force Awakens episode 7, you saw that C-3PO found it fascinating that, that Han Solo didn't recognize him because of the red arm. This explains exactly how he got that red arm. And the way he did it is completely uncharacteristic of C-3PO. So seeing C-3PO vulnerable like this, it really is like, wow. C-3PO, you are almost human if you weren't a robot. So it has to do with him and a whole bunch of other robots. That's where he gets the red arm. I don't want to spoil this one too much for you because it's a really good comic. You really need to get it. It's only a one-shot comic. Even if you aren't reading any of the other Star Wars stuff, which shame on you if you're not because they're amazing, you should pick up this Star Wars C-3PO issue. It's only a one-shot. It's only $4.99 unless you're at some other crazy comic book shop who jumped up the price to $20. I apologize. You can get it here. All right, next up, Gwenpool, issue number 1 from Marvel Comics. Now, before we get started really explaining this comic, I've told you in the past how I'm not a big fan of Deadpool, but, Gwenpool's coming up, and I didn't want to ride this whole, oh, we all like Gwenpool wave that was going out across the nation. I read it, and I'm kind of on board with this whole Gwenpool character. You gotta understand, she is not from Earth 616, Earth 0161, or any of the other thousands of multiverses that are in the Marvel Universe. This Gwen is from our Earth, is from this Eternia. She's from here, and she got stuck in the comics after the whole Secret Wars thing. So she's a human being stuck in the comic, knows she's stuck in a comic, knows she can't die because she's a main character, but she has sidekicks that are with her that are expendable. And I'm sold on it. She acts silly because she knows she can. So she's not in any way, shape, or form related to Deadpool. She just took that moniker, took that name of Pool to go with the characteristics that she has, the way she is, her flaws and her idiosyncrasies. That's the way she is. She's very comedic in everything that she does. And it's a really good issue. Issue number 1, at the very end, she ends up having to go work for MODOK. So if you haven't checked it out yet, check it out. I was impressed. I have to say, not like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest comic ever. But it was good enough to say, you know what? I want to find out what's going to happen in issue 2, maybe issue 3 and 4. Pick it up. Gwenpool, issue number 1. All right, next up. This is full of number 1s here. Xena, Warrior Princess from Dynamite Comics, issue number 1. Now, I don't know if you ever saw Xena and Gabriella go at it way back when it was on TV, back in the mid-90s. So this is kind of picking up 10 to 15 years after all that happened. So the Lamentations of Xena, the Warrior Princess, goes out across the land, and they speak of her in different ways. She can go to a city, and she can hear her name being spoke of, and how she looks a certain way or does certain things. And she's just strolling on by because no one knows what Xena looks like now. And so she's actually helping people. Her and Gabby are walking the earth helping people. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. That's it. If you like Xena the Warrior Princess, get the comic. Period. All right. Finally, last up for our kids comic for this week, Rocket Raccoon and Groot. Normally Rocky Raccoon or Groot, well more so Rocky Raccoon, doesn't really go into the kids comic section because Rocket is kind of crazy and does some stuff that wouldn't normally approve for 2-year-olds to read, but this one is really enjoyable. It starts off with them playing D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, with the rest of the Avengers. And Rocket is the DM, and he's the dungeon master, and he's leading the group there together, and Tony Stark starts going off game. He's like, well, I create these mechs, and they're orc mechs, and they destroy everyone. And Rocket's getting frustrated and saying, you can't do that, you can't go off script, you gotta stay within the game, stay within the realm, no expansion pack, this is what we're doing, this is how you gotta play it. And Tony's like, get out of here, I gotta go, you geeks. And he says, I gotta go do my fantasy football anyway. And so Rocket starts talking smack like, fantasy football, and you're talking about me. And so Tony Stark's like, well, you know what? I bet you can't last a day in my fantasy football league. So they make a bet, and they go do the fantasy football league. Turns out Tony Stark, being a billionaire, he doesn't play fantasy football here on Earth. He goes to another off-planet place where they play football gladiatorial style. And that's his fantasy football league. So Rocket and Groot show up there and like, okay, this isn't what we thought, but let's give it a shot. They decimate the battlefield, decimate the other players, and they win. And Tony Stark has to go play D&D with Rocket and Groot back with the Avengers. And that's the end of the comic. Good comic, very enjoyable. If you want to enjoy a good comic with you and your kids, something you all can read together, Rocket Raccoon and Groot, issue number 4 is a good one to go with. All right, so that concludes the comics this week. There was a whole bunch out. Star Wars, Darth Vader was out. Mockingbird number 2 was out, really good. Bobby has some kind of superpowers. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. There's a whole bunch of other good comics, but again, we can only go over so many at the beginning, so that's what we got. That's the flavor for the week. Come to the shop, go to your local comic book shop, see what's on their wall, see what they got. All right, so let's get started with next week's comics. So first up, we have 4 kids walk into a bank, issue number 1. Now this is just how it sounds. There's 4 kids that are going to go rob a bank. What happens is there's a little girl whose father used to be a criminal, and then some other criminals, real klutzy criminals, come to hire her father. And knowing her father's too old to be doing this stuff, she doesn't want her father to get involved. She says, you know what, me and my friends are going to rob the bank so my father doesn't have to. So her and her 4 friends get involved to robbing the bank. I haven't read this comic yet, but on the cover there's a couple of pictures of some D20s. Might be some more role-playing involved. Look at that. All right. So that's 4 kids walk into a bank, issue number 1. Also, Action Comics number 51. Now, all these Action Comics, Superman comics, Batman comics, all the DC comics that are coming up to issues 50, 51, 52, these are going to be very important because of what DC's doing with their rebirth. They're going to end a lot of stories, per se, and then start up new story arcs to go or to tie into their DC rebirth story arc. So a lot of stuff is going to be ending. Superman's dying. It's a pretty big deal. All right. All new classic Captain Canuck issue number 1. Now we currently have the Captain Canuck storyline going right now. I think it's at issue number 7 or 8. But this is going to be the all new classic Captain Canuck. So it's the same Chapter House Comics that bought out the original storyline are now revising the original Captain Canuck and putting out new prints for it. So that's kind of what that is. The all-new Captain Canuck Classic, issue number 1. Astonishing Ant-Man number 7. It's going to find Ant-Man and his posse in Florida during spring break. Party! Woo! Back to the Future number 7 is coming out. Bloodshot Reborn number 12. Now this is looking at Bloodshot in the future. If you read the Bloodshot number 11, it showed him getting with Ninjak at the very end, the old Ninjak, and trying to take care of the land that he's watching over. It's been pretty good so far. All right, Captain America. Got him. Are you all right? You all right? Okay. Okay. Captain America, Road to War, issue number 1. Now this is going to lead us into the Civil War comic series that's coming up. And this is going to have the beginning of the new Steve Rogers back as Captain America. So we're going to see what happens with him there. Also, Chew, the comic book series about the detective who has to eat things to get its memory. It's a really good series. I wish more people would get it. It's really amazing. Chew is coming out the one-shot of the Demon Chicken Boil, and that's coming out this week. It has a blank if you want to, draw yourself as Boil. It's pretty amazing. All right, also, for all you video game players, Dark Souls. That's right, Dark Souls, the video game. It's getting its own comic, starting with issue number 1 this coming week, or this week. And that also has a blank. So if you want to have yourself being killed on the cover of Dark Souls, there you go. You can see it over and over and over. Should satisfy your dark soul. All right, also, Deadpool issue number 10 is coming up. And Deadpool Mercs for Money issue number 3, and Deadpool Spider-Man issue number 4. Now, this Deadpool Spider-Man issue number 4 is going to be a very important issue, and I can't stress to you enough, you need to pick this issue up because it's going to change the dynamic of the whole Spider-Man universe in the Marvel comic universe. Did that make sense to you? It sounded better in my head until it started coming out. Didn't make sense anymore. All right. Also, Divinity 2 issue number 1 is coming out, and I've harped on it before. Divinity number 1 from Valiant Comics, and I'm a big Valiant fan. Divinity number 1 was an amazing storyline that was all about time fluctuations and just one of Valiant Comics' most powerful characters. So check it out. Divinity number 2 issue number 1 is coming out this week. Also, again, another popular video game comic, Dragon Age Mage Killer issue number 5 is coming out this week. And that's going to be the conclusion for their 5-part series of Dragon Age Mage Killer. Did they do that on purpose? All right. Also, Flash issue number 50. Godzilla Oblivion issue number 2. So, you don't like a lot of words, that's the one to go with. A lot of action. Grumpy Cat and Pokey issue number 3 because Grumpy Cat. Haunted Mansion issue number 2 because Haunted Mansion. Coffin Comics is reintroducing Lady Death with its original creator Brian Palumbo in Lady Death issue number 1, Chaos Rules. So it's going to be a brand new story arc for the Lady Death series, taking place 20 to 30 years after the initial Lady Death series left off. I think it was Lady Death Apocalypse. Got to like issue 5, and then boom, went bankrupt. We didn't hear anything. Lady Death came out. Lady Demon came out at the same time. They were both really good comic series, and then just fell off the planet. But now Coffin Comics has the rights, the intellectual property rights back to Lady Death and Lady Demon, so you're going to see all new story arcs. Also, Coffin Comics is introducing a comic in June called La Muerte, and it's about a ex-vet. She came back to her family after being on tour in Iraq, and she comes back. She's celebrating Day to Day with her family. Some drug dealers think that they're spending their money for some reason and kill her family. It's kind of like Punisher, but a female and Hispanic. So totally check it out. La Muerte, that's coming up in June. I'll remind you again later, don't worry. Also, what else do we have coming out this week? Oh my gosh, Madballs. How many of you children from the late 80s, early 80s, mid 80s, maybe even the early 90s, remember the old cartoon and the old toys, the Madballs toys? They were little squeezy balls. They were ugly and grotesque. They have their own comic, starting with issue number 1, and they're on the Madball world. So it's really cool. I already read it because I was so excited about it. Living that nostalgia. It's a really good series. It's a really good issue. You can read it with your kids if they're kind of crazy like my kids, maybe. Check it out. It's a good series. Also, Poison Ivy, Cycle of Life and Death, issue number 4. In issue number 3, she teamed up with her. Catwoman came to her at the very end, and she got that one dude trapped him. So that's been a really good series so far, because Poison Ivy with babies? What? All right. Power Man Iron Fist, issue number 3. And I've told y'all before, it's one of my favorite comics right now. I'm a big fan of the buddy cop thing. Power Man Iron Fist was the originator of the buddy cop in the comic form. Also, Star Trek Manifest Destiny, issue number 1. What else we got? Oh, here's a cool one. Twilight Zone and Shadow. You know Shadow, the one that they made a movie of with one of the Baldwin brothers. That Shadow, except You know what? I like that Shadow movie. I'm sorry. I did like it. You know, I'm a fan of all the big comic movies, unless it's horrible. That one wasn't that horrible. I kind of enjoyed it. All right, so Twilight Zone Shadow, issue number 1. That's going to be a 4-part series, and that's coming out this Wednesday. Also, Wonder Woman issue number 50, and Exo Man-O-War issue number 46. Now, Valiant is getting ready to do not necessarily a reboot itself, but it's clearing out some of its characters to make way for other storylines. Exo Man-O-War is going to be one of those stories that's unfortunately going to the wayside for a little bit, which is sad because that was one of the originators for Valiant comic series. It was Harbinger, Exo Man-O-War, Bloodshot, and so they're making that way to bring on I don't know what else. But yeah, that concludes the comics for this coming week. Let's talk about some news. So, news for this week. Just happened recently. Want to give our condolences to the family of Chyna from the former WWE superstar. I believe her name was Jean Lauren. I could be wrong. But she recently passed away at the age of 45. Relatively young. Sorry to see her go. Also, some more kind of just, gosh, news is Houston. If you're in the Houston area, you know, our hearts are with you right now. The flooding is pretty bad right now because right now it's raining and thundering and lightning, even here in Seguin, and we're about a good, 2 hours away, 2.5 hours, depending on how fast you drive, from Houston. And it's pretty intense. You know, we have the moat going on in front of the shop here. You have to cross it to get into the shop. But yeah, that's going to conclude our we're sorry, we're praying for you news. On to the rest of the news. Elizabeth Banks has been cast, and well, we all knew that, but now we have seen the official picture of her as Rita Repulsa. If you haven't seen it, you're going to see it now. 1, 2, 3. You see that? That's Elizabeth Banks as Rita Repulsa for the new Power Rangers comic book series. Now, we're going to crumble that up, get rid of that. Also, while we're on that subject, Scarlett Johansson has been cast in the live-action Ghost in the Machine. And that has also brought up a whole bunch of whitewash backlashing that Hollywood's receiving right now because they cast Scarlett Johansson. And the directors, they kind of shot themselves in the foot on this one because they were saying, oh, there's no good Asian actors. Come on now. So they did that. They said that. Shot themselves in the foot. I like Scarlett Johansson, but I gotta agree, man. Let's see some more diversity. Let's see some more cultural diversity in these movies, please. So that's that. Also, I don't know if you were watching The Flash or the Arrow TV shows. Black Canary is dead. But it's like the comics. They might come back to life. Who knows? Nobody knows. Flash lost his powers this past week. Zoom stole Caitlyn at the end of the show. Fear the Walking Dead, there's a boat with guns on it. What else is going on? There's a lot of stuff going on. I just can't think of anything else right now. So that's going to conclude this week's episode. On that note, leave some comments below. Let us know what you're reading. Let us know what you want to hear us talk about. And we'll see you next week. See what you did? That was beautiful. This is my flesh. We're being animated here.
Power and force of lightning! Make our